Magandang buhay! Good day everyone! Kumusta po ang inyong nagdaang linggo? I hope everyone is safe and healthy as always. To all our listeners and followers, maraming salamat sa pagtangkilik sa aming munting programa. My name is Teacher Tina Zamora, ang inyong podcast guru na makikipagkwentuhan sa inyo para talakayin ang iba't ibang issue at solusyon, lalo na sa usaping edukasyon ng alternative delivery mode. Kaya tara na, maki-impact talakayan na. For the past 3 months, we have discussed the overview of this project called Impact Learning System. At napag-usapan natin ang mga major components nito like programmed and resource teaching, peer group learning, and individualized study or self-instruction. And to wrap up this season, magkwentuhan tayo to revisit the journey ng Impact Learning System. Our finale guests for today are Dr. Diosdado San Antonio, former Undersecretary, Curriculum and Instruction of the Department of Education, and now the Manager of the Research and Innovation Office, and Mr. Benito Benoza, Manager of the Knowledge Management and Networking Office of Simeo Inotech, or let me say, siya po ang production manager namin dito sa Impact Podcast. So, Sir Bennett, for starters, can you share with us or give us a context kung paano po nagsimula ang Impact Learning System?
Okay. I guess being the oldest person in the room, that's the likely question for me. But okay, the Impact Learning System or the instructional management by parents, community, and teachers started even before Inotech, our regional center, was established.
Okay.
Okay, a certain Dr. Bob Jacobs, or Robert Jacobs, who was then with USAID, Education Advisor for USAID, started the notion of exploring innovative approaches to delivering learning.
I see.
And he partnered with another founding father of Inotech, so to speak, Dr. Daryl Nichols, and together they put together the Impact Learning System. Okay, let's go back a little bit to the Southeast Asia back in the late 60s, 1970. Number one, these countries are not rich. And many of the Southeast Asian countries are saddled with the usual development concerns. Not too much money to invest in education, high population rate increases, lack of teachers, expensive textbooks. Some of them are imported.
Which is still our problem now.
Still a problem now, yes. But the solution at that time was to look at the problem of education. Let's call it a problem.
Definitely.
And look at the challenge of education and see how it can be, how innovations can be introduced to address the need for achieving learning objectives. We don't think in terms of the resources that is put in. Because remember, the resources you would very likely need schools, classrooms. There's a standard for the classroom, 1 to 36 students. That's expensive to put up. And in the Philippines, until now, we spend a great deal of money in refurbishing schools which are damaged by earthquakes, typhoons.
And yet, kulang pa din.
And kinukulang pa din.
Yes.
Textbooks. It's hard to correct them, as we most of us experience. And then it's hard to transport.
Right.
And then they get, especially nowadays, they get obsolete too easily, and too fast.
Right.
And then, of course, teachers. Right now, yes, the Philippines is achieving that 1:36 teacher-to-pupil ratio, but before it was an insurmountable dream. So that was the context in which the Impact Learning System was developed. And that's why, as you mentioned earlier, we came out, or the founding fathers came out with innovative approaches like peer learning, programmed instruction, self-directed learning, to use the current term nowadays. Those are innovative approaches at that time, and they were brought together to come up with the Impact Learning System. So instead of expensive textbooks, which would be expensive to produce, revise, and transport, they have modules, and which could be easily corrected. Marry it with current technology, computers
Easier.
and printers, it's easier to
Yes,
reproduce those
correct.
learning modules. Teachers. Before, with the dearth of teachers, the idea was to enable a single teacher to manage up to 100 students. Okay, that problem has resolved itself now, and we are glad that the Philippines is producing
Yes.
so many capable and dedicated teachers. But somewhere in the world, that is still a problem, and Inotech has that part of the solution, which is programmed instruction, organizing the classroom
Or
and
training
the
the
school.
students to be
Yes,
teachers
yes, that's
themselves.
the peer learning
Yes, yes.
approach.
So, Sir Dance, can you share with us or give us a context kung paano po nagsimula ang impact learning system?
Teacher Tina, my memories about the impact system has been a long time ago. I think I
Okay.
was a young teacher then when
Wow.
I saw schools announcing that they're implementing this
And where were you
program
teaching then?
in Bicol.
Wow, okay.
And so it was really something that I thought was important because the parents and the community were given the opportunity to have a hand in the
Yeah.
academic lives of their children.
How did the impact learning system help the faculty, the teachers, the principals of the schools that you were helping out?
Okay, by looking at the learning system as a way to solve, or sorry, to achieve the targeted or the targeted learning goals, then you refocus or reframe the issues. You don't think in terms of so many teachers, so many classrooms, but rather what can be done to accomplish them.
So it's a process-oriented
Right, right.
system.
And then note that the CNT at Impact is community and teachers.
Yes.
Sometimes within the community, there are trained engineers, for instance, who would be able to assist the teacher in teaching difficult concepts in math or geometry or similar such projects, or in practical subjects. Even a farmer would be able to teach life sciences because they know better the life cycle of a plant,
Yes,
insects,
yes.
the
I'm just curious,
soil.
if this was introduced before,
Yes.
how was it accepted?
Okay. There are a number of policy issues
Yeah.
related to that, and that's why maybe later on I would go into why we kind of
Okay,
broke it off
sige,
into
sige.
different aspects. But let me just say at this point, it was piloted in the 1970s. It was piloted in the Philippines, in Cebu, and then in
Also, it started in Cebu.
the Philippines. But
Okay.
there's another one in Indonesia, in Solo. They call it Project Pamong.
And it's the same. It's actually the same program.
Basically the same program. Indonesia went off with it, and that's why, well, those who are studying Indonesian education, they came out with Paket A, Paket B, Paket C,
Okay,
which
okay.
are alternative
Hybrids,
approaches.
yeah.
And then, well, for the Philippines, it was a rather different case, but we did have at some point more than 200 impact schools.
I see.
And until now, there are those schools which are adopting different aspects,
Right.
or manifestations,
Yeah,
if you may.
yeah. Then came the pandemic.
Yes.
And then suddenly the whole education system was thrown off to implement something that is very much like the impact learning system. And what can you say about that?
Exactly. So when I look back to my life as a USEC for curriculum and instruction during the COVID-19 pandemic, everything we did was somehow inspired by our previous practices relative to making sure that learning is still able to continue in impact. And of course, our decision to also streamline the learning
Right.
competencies was also important.
Right.
Our decision then, and our former secretary, our center director now, was very clear about making sure that regional directors, school superintendents, and even principals should be given autonomy in coming up with decisions just to make sure that learning continues. So we
Right.
really made sure that the decisions then were not centrally dictated.
Yes, yes.
And we took note of the innovations being designed by teachers, by parents, by even learners
Yes,
themselves.
right. And the community got involved with one another.
Yes.
Because it was the time to help each
So
other
it was
out.
really impact at work.
Yes, it's true.
Without the name.
I don't want to say that the pandemic was a blessing, but it really showed how the impact learning system was essential to be implemented
It has
during a
been.
time of emergencies and, let's say, natural calamities in the country.
Okay, so note that in the pandemic, the conditions that demanded impact learning solutions were were very much present.
Yes.
We revised the curriculum to come out with the MELCs, the most essential learning
Yes,
competencies,
yes.
and therefore your uh, garden variety textbook may not be so useful,
Right.
even if they would reach the learners, no, who are not in school.
Yes.
So that was one situation where modules were
Were really the
resorted
easier
to,
resource.
and it could have been, and they could revise the module, simplify it, and probably introduce some of the basic elements of impact. Modular instruction is
Right,
one.
right.
Okay, in the outside of the classroom, there are families which comprise, shall we say, grade 5, grade 1, grade 2 learners. No, they could teach each other.
Right.
The grade 5 learner already knows how to read, and given the modules,
And instruction.
yeah, they could assist teaching their younger
Their younger,
siblings.
yes, yes.
So that is, in a way, a manifestation of
You
peer
targeted,
learning.
yes, and you
which is,
targeted communities wherein
yes,
children were already together,
yes,
and so they were able to be grouped together
yes. But
automatically.
then note that during the pandemic,
Hindi pwede yun.
this situation would be difficult. But I'm
Yes,
sure
yes.
in certain, shall we say,
Areas.
closely knit communities,
Yeah.
that's bound to happen.
Magkakasama sa bahay,
Yeah,
for
hindi
example,
naman
if they're children.
nagkakalayo-layo
Yeah.
na.
Yeah. Aside from, let's say, because the pandemic was really a life-changing phenomenon for everybody, but are there stories that you want to share about the impact learning system that really that was most memorable for you?
Of course, this has been very inspiring for me because I've been advocating myself the so-called school-based management initiative,
Okay.
which has also been the fad in education, school, system management, management for our public schools
Right, right.
around the world.
Yeah.
And I felt that impact has actually the idea of impact is very much aligned with school-based
And
management.
very innovative even
And
through
very
the years.
innovative,
Yeah.
engaging communities and stakeholders in making decisions relative to what children should learn, identifying priorities on what should be done so that learning would be more engaging.
Yes.
Is something that's, of course, very noteworthy.
Yes.
And yes, I've heard a lot of stories from parents excited to be given a part.
Well, maybe these are outside of the pandemic situation.
Yes.
But I do know, and I have interviewed a number of professionals in their own right. Some of them are heading NGOs devoted to education.
Yes.
They went through the impact learning system. They studied in Albay province,
Yes, yes.
and they went through the impact learning system. And later on, according to them, it helped them develop their leadership, their self-confidence, and responsibility.
Yes. Well, we had previous guests who were engineers, who are lawyers, who were very proud to be graduates of the impact learning system, and they were really using it in their careers.
Yeah, perhaps in another context, no, a very similar learning system evolved in Latin America, in Guatemala, if I am not mistaken. Very much related, but they independently developed. No? They call it Escuela Nueva. Interestingly, one of the
Teachers?
sorry. One of the aspects that prompted us to look into was leadership, because they said of their observation was because of the peer learning experience, each learner has a chance to become a leader, and that kind of developed their responsibility and their leadership qualities and self-confidence.
I see.
So there's a lot to be said about it. But then, of course, one would like to think that we have gotten better. We don't need to
And
worry
you've
about too
evolved.
many. Yes, the whole system evolved.
It was following the signs of the time. So, regardless of the pandemic, the change of the curriculum from K to 12, the modules of the impact learning system was easily flexible to what was happening in society. Okay. At this point, no, para tayong magfa-fast talk. I will read a statement and you react or give your comments. So it's points from the impact learning system, the principles of the impact learning system. So I will state the principle and I would like to hear your thought on each point. Okay, so point number 1 is responsibility rests not just on the shoulders of the teachers and the school staff, but is shared among the different stakeholders, mostly the parents, as their role as first teachers to their children becomes more pronounced. The community, through the local officials, also share in the burden by providing support to the schools and to the parents. So, what is your take on the different stakeholders and the different roles they have in the community? And how did it impact the impact learning system?
A quick reaction is I might have to quote an often quoted statement from an African proverb that it takes a village to raise a child. I would have to take issue with some of the points there. Firstly, because of the community, we look at the community as a resource to provide resources.
Yeah.
It's not just material resources like space or pakain or learning resources. There are knowledge resources in the community which can be tapped. As I said, a farmer, a dairy farmer, if you have one.
It's like knowledge sharing in the
Yes,
community.
would be able to enrich the learning experience of the children. There are people in the community who would be able to oversee, especially we want now to develop reading ability. There are elders in the community who would be able to assist and probably be a more constant presence for, for reinforcement, motivation. These are the things that other roles of the community members, on top of those of the teachers and the parents, would be very, very useful.
So you technically expanded the schools.
Yes.
Because it's not only in the four walls of the schools, but it's really the whole community. Okay.
I have announced actually several times that Bayanihan was alive in the Department of Education. Impact is so congruent with our practice, the Bayanihan at work in
we have
Filipino
to help each other out.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you don't actually dictate and tell people to come. They all just come when they know that their contributions are important
and needed.
During the COVID-19 pandemic, as we attempted to make sure that learning continued, parents, stakeholders, even our development partners were coming forward, giving their share. Of course, we also are very appreciative of the local government units. They ask us what else would we needed so that the resources that were, of course, and have always been scarce, could be marshaled to towards the...
And it was easy to deliver. The impact learning system was easy to deliver because it was very modular.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Point number 2 is education is a process of developing socio-emotional and leadership skills. I think you mentioned part of the leadership earlier.
That's right. And yes, right now, because of the pandemic and being cooped up in their own places,
Yes.
socio-emotional skills as well as cyber
Leadership.
wellness,
Yes. Mental health.
mental health are major issues. Again, uh, not everything is solved by the impact learning system, of course, but then it provides us a good platform
Right.
where we could work together, we could tap resources. By resource, again, other players, experts,
Yes.
etc., where we can who can help us manage behavioral issues among children, and of course, let's face it, we still lack some resources like bandwidth, laptops, and computers.
Yes.
These are resources that can be shared in the community.
Correct, correct.
Of course, it's not just the skills of the learners that are developed when you do the impact way of providing basic education services. The leadership skills of parents, of community learners, leaders, and even the leaders themselves, the PTA officials,
Yes, yes.
are also enhanced. And of course, you have to really make sure that there's a good opportunity for everybody to work harmoniously. And that
Yes.
would really challenge your socio-emotional skills if
Right.
you get involved in
Right.
an impact activity.
It's not just the cognitive that we were dealing with, it was more socio-emotional. Okay. Point number 3 is learning can take place anywhere, anytime, anyhow. Even during this pandemic, learning continues among children in the safety of their houses through online, offline, and blended learning.
For that, I would like to look beyond the current pandemic. We are moving
Yes.
towards face-to-face
Yes, yes.
cla-
And it's a totally
classes.
different school system now after the pandemic.
Yes, I mean, we can't go back to what
Yes,
it
you
used
can't.
to be.
Oh, yeah.
But then let's look at the more pressing issues like climate change adaptation. Okay, in so many places in Metro Manila, even in Metro Manila, some places get flooded.
Yes.
Children could not go to school.
Right.
And then, of course, associated with it, only this morning I got a report about NLEX having major problems.
Yeah.
Difficulty of transportation. Would that mean a wasted day's learning for children? No, if we apply the impact system, that
Correct.
can be done to assist or to continue learning. I would recall a case in Guimaras so many years ago. They could not stop the children, whole families, from working on the mango plantation.
Yes.
That's their livelihood. So the principal was innovative. He said he gave out modules and kept them and advised the children and the parents to get the children to read
Right.
during rest periods,
Right.
etc. And that is, in a way, working around some policy like if the child is absent for so long, he would be dropped out of the class, which makes it even more difficult for him to come back.
Right.
But with that kind of
It's a
stopgap
continuation.
solution,
Yeah.
the principal was able to prove that, well, he continued learning, and so when he comes back after the mango bagging season, then we could do remedial instruction for him,
Correct,
for the
correct,
children. And that
So
is,
there was
again,
no reason for learning to stop.
exactly.
That's the
And that's
lesson.
why learning takes place anywhere, anytime.
Yes, correct.
Absolutely. It was able to happen. We were able to really say that the learning spaces are not just confined in the schools, that are our usual concept of school, but
Yeah.
it could happen anywhere.
Anywhere.
And I saw houses transformed into small
Classrooms.
classrooms.
Yeah.
I even went to a very remote area where a house was converted into a mini classroom. The parent, after teaching or facilitating learning for her son, would invite the playmates in the neighborhood to join the son to learn. And I think this is impact.
So it was really a community
yeah,
vibe during this time. Okay, point number 4 is all school-age children should have access to inclusive quality education. I think this is also one of the rights of children.
Oh, yes. That's what you call rights-based
Yes.
education.
Yes.
That each child of school age should be learning, should be able to learn if one chooses to.
Right.
Again, because children mature or approach learning at different times, they have different learning styles, and so forth. But yes, on the whole, it is a basic right for a child.
I agree. We cannot exclude anyone
Right.
just because there are certain handicaps.
Yes.
And we have to make sure that everybody is given the opportunity to develop the basic skills for independent living,
Yes.
independent for the basic skills for them to survive. So anybody should be given access to an opportunity
Quality
to learn,
education.
and impact does it.
Okay, so point number 5 is a child-centered education uses contextualized learning materials aligned with 21st century curriculum.
I would put a focus on child-centeredness. Even beyond the materials, the
Yes.
curriculum, and the capabilities of the teachers. When we call ourselves child-centered, that means we begin with the child.
Right.
What the child needs, where the child is coming from, and then, of course, what the child is capable of doing at the time we get started.
So it's
And it's up to
developmentally
them.
appropriate.
Right.
Yes.
And it's up to them, up to us rather, to ensure that the learning journey continues.
Okay.
We cannot run away from making sure that the kids are made to learn the 21st century skills. It's really not just what the brain should have. They should also be effective leaders themselves. They should be allowed to take the initiative when they feel that something has to be accomplished. They don't have to wait for people to tell them. I think these are all, again, made real by the impact, I would say, technology.
Yeah.
And also during the COVID-19 pandemic, this was also very obvious.
Okay. Point number 6 is a more meaningful learning is lifelong, life-wide, life-deep, and life-wise.
Okay, I must admit I'm not too sure about the life-wise part. But indeed, setting the children to a lifelong journey begins at an early age, and that is why, again, we wanted to focus on the tool subjects,
Right.
the ability to read,
Read.
do critical thinking,
Yes.
basic mathematical operations,
Because those are the skills that are needed for their lives.
and for further learning.
And for further learning. Correct.
And by setting the foundations right, we set the child on a lifelong and life deep
yes,
journey.
yes.
Learning has to really happen anytime, anywhere, and it
At
has
any
to be
point
part-
of their lives.
At
yes.
any point of their lives, yes, and it does not end even after a person obtains a diploma. So
yeah.
learning has to be continuous, and I feel that that's the way to go if we want to create societies that will also continue to learn.
Okay. Point number 7 is every teacher is a manager of the teaching learning process.
Okay, we used to look at the manager as some sort of businessman running an
Yeah,
enterprise.
yeah.
But yes, indeed, a teacher is running an enterprise, a learning enterprise. And what does a manager do? Number 1, manage the resources. Be they time, money, learning materials, the learning environment,
Yes.
and then, of course, towards achieving a certain goal. What are these learning goals? They are set in our curricula and in our learning system, and that is what the teacher is supposed to do. it's not mainly administering or managing
Yes,
the
or just
records, etc.
delivering, just
Yeah, and
delivering the
delivering.
curriculum. Yeah.
You might as well use the television for that.
Right, right.
But orchestrating all these different factors, optimizing the use of whatever resources, be they learning modules, TV programs,
Yes.
podcasts,
Yes, yes.
and then of course
And being
ensuring,
creative in the
oh,
delivery.
yes, and then
Yes.
ensuring that the parents or other members
Are
of the
involved.
community would be able to follow through, and they are
Yes.
all in sync. That
Yes.
is the job of a manager,
That's
and the
true.
teacher is doing all that.
That's true. You can put a teacher in any corporation and they'll thrive.
I'm confident about
Yes,
that.
yes. Okay.
A teacher manages the teaching learning process. And of course, we have the professional teachers who do the facilitation and management of the experiences that the learners go through so that they can develop the competencies we have identified for these learners. But we know that it's not just the professional teacher
Right.
who manages, it's the parents as well. And the research is also almost conclusive that parents who are deeply engaged in the academic lives of their kids end up developing high-achieving learners. The research is very clear on that. And so everyone was given the chance to manage. I know that even the learners themselves manage their own learning.
Very much like the impact learning system wherein there's peer learning. So all the stakeholders had to get involved and become managers of the
Yes.
system. Okay. So Sir Dads, before we say goodbye, any parting words for all the stakeholders?
To our dear stakeholders, let's continue to support efforts to ensure that the youngsters are transformed into productive citizens. And everybody has a role to play in ensuring that we will create Filipinos who are ready to compete in this 21st century. Mabuhay po tayong lahat. And God
Thank you.
bless.
Thank you. Ikaw naman, Sir Bennett, any parting words before we wrap up this episode?
Thank you. For everyone else who were involved and who have been listening to the Impact series, I would like to share that, first of all, Impact is just one of a few other technology packages that have been developed and are continuously evolving over time. Some of them have endured over time, addressing many different problems or many manifestations of the same problem over the decades. But we do not stop there. From access, we want to go into quality, and from quality to better quality, and to continuously developing outputs of the education system, who are the future citizens, not only of the Philippines, but perhaps of the region. So there's a lot more in store, and we are just beginning with the innovations in education. We hope you will stay with us, understanding further what we could do to improve the learning experience, not only of children, but all our learners, be they for age 5 to 555.
Oh, that's so exciting to hear, Sir Bennett. Thank you so much.
And thank you, ma'am. Thank you to the rest of those listeners and viewers of this podcast. Stay with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. My takeaway for this episode, everyone, is the concept of community in the learning journey of our children. Indeed, as Sir Bennett said, it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a lot of stakeholders to raise that child, that one child. And that one child can also be a stakeholder to reach out to other children. So yun po yung pinaka tumatak sa isip ni Teacher Tina during this whole episode. And we'd like to thank all, both our guests. Thank you so much to Dr. Diosdado San Antonio and Mr. Benito Benoza of Simeo Inotech for taking the time to join us in this finale episode. For more information about Inotech's published knowledge products and services, bisitahin lamang ang website na www.simeo-inotech.org. Follow and share our social media accounts, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram na naka-flash po ang details sa inyong mga screen. At syempre, huwag din kakalimutan i-follow ang aming Inotech YouTube channel. Before we do finally close this season of Impact Podcast, may mga tao lang akong gustong pasalamatan for making this program possible. For the management of Simeo Inotech under the leadership of Dr. Leonor Magtolis Briones, thank you so much po. To Dr. Ramon C. Bacani, former Inotech Director, for giving the go signal in producing this knowledge product. To the Research and Innovation Office who took care of this project since its inception. To Ma'am Debbie, Sir Philip, Miss Yoli, Miss Kat, Miss Lauren, and Miss Emmy. To the Information Management Unit of Inotech headed by Mr. Jellico Ariasgado. To the Systems Management Unit of Inotech sa pamumuno ni Sir Roland Malyare, sila po nagpro-provide ng mga laptops at internet connection natin, especially sa mga Zoom interviews. To the Educational Media Unit who's been responsible and on top in producing this program. To Sir Jesse Tuason, former EMU head. To Lovely Cabil, our production assistant. To Herman Montialto, our videographer and editor. To John Cruz, our photographer and in charge sa aming mga ilaw. To Mark Antido, our technical director. Syempre kay Jason Parafina, our executive producer and writer of this program. At kay Sir Benito Benoza, our production manager, for supporting, and siya talaga ang nag-push para makagawa kami ng ganitong programa. To all our guests and resource persons, lalo na yung mga former Impact learners na nag-share ng kanilang mga experiences, may lawyer, may engineer, may teachers tayo na product ng Impact Learning System. Sa inyong lahat, maraming salamat po. Muli, for the last time, ito po si Teacher Tina na nagpapaalala, lahat ng bagay may paraan. Kung gusto mong matuto, halika na't makihalubilo. Sa aming programa, kasali lahat ng miyembro ng pamilya. Dito, asahan mong si teacher ay may kasangga, magulang at komunidad tulong-tulong, sama-sama. Thank you for joining us in this episode. See you all soon and God bless everyone.